When I titled this presentation, when I first read it, I entitled it the property tax process. Truth is, the property tax process is more of a cycle. This is an overview of the process. Property taxes are administered by local officials and supervised by the Florida Department of Revenue. And there are basically 7 steps to that cycle. The first is establishing the property tax base, done by the property appraiser, property tax rates, which are set by elected officials, independent special districts, dependent special districts, water districts, those folks that take money out of our pockets. Annual notification in the form of a trim notice. The next part is the appeals process. I don't know if any of you have been through that process. Billing and payment. Unfortunately, everybody's probably familiar with that part. That's where you get the bill and you pay the bill. Collections and refund, and then the last is the funding of the public education and local services. So that's an overview of the process. We're going to get into each step, beginning with the property tax base. Property tax base is simply a nice fancy term for the total taxable value of the county. So if you were to take the whole polygon of Brevard County and put a red dot on every single property, once you added up the total taxable value, that's basically the tax base. And that is established by the property appraiser annually on January 1st of every year. After that value is established, exemptions are applied or classifications are applied, and the end result is the total taxable value of each property, and then in the aggregate would be the total taxable value for the entire county. That is also done by district. So for instance, if you are a taxing authority, Road and Bridge District 1, the same would take place within that polygon for that jurisdiction. So for this example, we're going to talk about total taxable value throughout the county to make the calculations and the examples easy to understand. The third part of the property tax cycle is the annual notification, which is trim notice, truth in millage notice that you receive, which usually comes in the mail about the 3rd week in August. This is an extremely important piece of information. Very, very important that everyone remembers when they receive their trim notice to open it up, take a look at it, make sure if they have the personal exemptions they've applied for, there have been any changes in their value, that they agree with it. Okay? So in August, the property appraiser sends this notice of proposed property taxes. It contains your value established as of January the 1st. That's the legal assessment date. So that means whatever is physically on your property as of January the 1st is what is being valued for that year. Applicable exemptions, proposed millage rates established by the taxing authority, your estimated taxes owed, and the deadline for contesting your market value, your exemptions, or property classifications. So those are the 5 very, very important pieces of information that will be on a trim notice. Value adjustment boards are the boards that by law have to be employed by a county of this size to hear cases of folks like yourself that are contesting their values, their exemptions, property classifications. The next part of the process is the property tax bill and payment. Probably not a whole lot of explanation needed for that part. County tax collector sends out the annual tax bills in late October, early November. For us, it's almost always November the 1st. Full payment is due by March the 30th, and discounts are up to 4% for early payments. Collections and refunds. Property tax bill is not paid by March 30th. The tax collector can sell tax certificates on the property. Not really going to get into a whole lot of that because that is a whole nother presentation on tax certificates and delinquent taxes and how that works. I just wanted to have it in there so you know that is an intricate part of the property tax cycle. Funding of public education and local services. After the tax collector collects all of the taxes, or within the process actually, distributions are made to all of the different taxing authorities that you see on your bill, and that's the tax collector's responsibility. So once it's all said and done, the distribution of those funds basically is about 50% for public education funding and 30% for local government revenues. If you notice on your trim notice, if you pay attention to your tax rates, you'll notice that about 50% of your total millage rate is dedicated to public education. So that's pretty commensurate with what you'll see in just about every county. Okay, so you're a taxing agency and you're trying to determine how much taxes do I need. So here's my budget, what all do I need to fund, and how do I figure out what I need to levy in order to be able to cover all of the things that I want to spend money on. And very simple. It's my need, how much money I need, divided by what I have, which is the total taxable value. That equals the tax rate. So what I did is I gave you 2 examples here. In example 1, we have 10 homes. All of them have a taxable value of $100,000. So we have $1 million of total taxable value. That's our tax base. Okay? We need $5,000. That's what we need to cover all the things that we want to pay for. We have $1 million to work with, so we're going to have to levy a millage rate of 5 mils. 5 mils meaning $5 per $1,000 of taxable value. Okay? So theoretically, each homeowner would pay $500 in property taxes. That's no longer the case anymore. Now we have some other variables that make that equation much more difficult. So we're going to move down to example number 2. Same 10 homes, but now we have 5 homes with a taxable value of $100,000, and we have 5 with a taxable value of $50,000. So now we only have $750,000 for our total tax base. Here's what it boils down to though. We got 5 homeowners that are going to pay $667, and 5 homeowners are going to pay $333.50. Your trim notice. Again, I just wanted to reinforce the importance of making sure that you review your trim notice. I'm not going to read the slide to you again, but there's important information on there you want to make sure that you make yourself aware of. There's a very small window of opportunity to contest an assessment or an exemption. You only have 25 days. Okay? Potentially, 350,000 folks could call and request an informal conference, and there's just no way that a property appraiser's office would be able to accommodate. So I tell folks, if you have not had a conference within the first 3 days of contacting the property appraiser's office, go down and file your petition. That way you have established your administrative right of appeal. If you end up withdrawing it, that's fine, but at least you haven't lost the opportunity to do that. So again, a very small window of opportunity. Okay, the big question of the night, millage rate. Is it a tax increase or is it not a tax increase? The rollback rate, and you guys have heard that, sometimes you'll hear folks refer to it as the roll forward rate. You're hearing that more often because the rollback rate is typically an increased rate from the prior year now because we've had such a reduction in our total taxable value. So understand if you hear folks say roll forward, it is by definition a rollback rate, okay, which I know seems backwards. So the rollback rate is defined as the millage rate that provides the same ad valorem tax revenue for each taxing authority that was levied during the previous year. That's a mouthful. Here's what it simply means. If you collected $100 in taxes in 2010 and you want to collect $101 in 2011, you have to advertise that to folks as a tax increase. It's required by law. You collect $1 more. Not if the millage rate increases. The millage rate can increase and it still not be defined as a tax increase per Florida law. This is how it works. Year 1, you have taxes needed as $125 million. That's what the county needs to fund everything that the county wants to fund. You have a total taxable value of $25 billion and your tax rate is 5 mils. So everybody's going to pay $5 on $1,000 of taxable value. Year 2, you still need $125 million. Still going to fund everything you funded the previous year. But your taxable value has dropped to $20 billion. Now your rollback rate, the rate which is required by all taxing authorities to calculate in order to realize the same amount of money as the previous year, is now 6.25. So, an example, the taxing authority has increased the millage rate by 25%. They're going to adopt the rollback rate, but will collect the same tax revenue as the previous year. Therefore, there is no requirement to advertise the millage rate increase as a tax rate increase. We have been experiencing that for the past at least 2 years. Okay? Our aggregate rollback rate is an increase in the millage rate from the prior year. But because the taxing authority is not realizing one dime more, they do not have to advertise that as a tax increase. So you will find that they will say, we did not increase taxes, it's revenue neutral. Okay? When the fact is the tax rate, the rate in which you're taxed, increased by 25%. What we have here is an example of what would have to be advertised by a taxing authority as a tax increase. So in this example, the taxing authority has not increased the millage rate. And tax authorities love to say that. We didn't increase the millage rate. It's the same as it was last year. They're adopting the same millage rate as the previous year, but they're going to collect more tax revenue than the previous year. Therefore, there's a requirement to advertise this as a tax increase. So let's look at year one. We need $125 million, cover everything that we want to purchase this year. We have a total taxable of $25 billion. Our tax rate's $5 per thousand. Okay, that's what we levied. Year two, haven't seen this example in quite a while, but we used to see this kind of example where we need $135 million. We have $10 million other things that we'd like to purchase, and we have a taxable value of $27 billion. We've appreciated a $2 billion there, the total tax roll. And that calculation that we're required to do, the only thing that the state says you're required to calculate in terms of tax rates until you reach 10 mils, is the rollback rate. Well, if the taxing authority were to adopt the rollback rate, which would realize the $125 million that they collected the previous year, that would be a millage rate of 4.63. Instead, we're going to levy the same tax rate as last year. We're not increasing your taxes because we're adopting the same rate. The fact is we're going to collect $10 million more because our taxable value, our tax base, has appreciated. This would have to be advertised as a tax increase. So along with the budget summary, and it would look something like this. This is what has to be advertised. The name of the taxing authority, A, the initially proposed tax levy. In our equation, we had 12.5. We lost $500,000 as a result of the value adjustment board of reductions or exemptions or classifications that were granted. Our total actual property tax levy the previous year was $125 million, and this year we want to levy $135 million. So this is the notice that would be put in the paper. This is the only requirement. So this is your notice, guys. Hope you get the paper and read it that day. That's it. That's what you get. How is my property tax bill calculated? I get this question pretty often. Basically, we start out with just value. That is synonymous with market value, the value that the appraiser appraises your property for on January the 1st. You have minus any assessment limits. That would be any differential realized as a result of Save Our Homes, your homestead exemption, or any other assessment cap that was applicable. And that gets you to your assessed value. Okay? The assessed value is now, we take off the exemptions, $50,000 depending on the value of your property for the general fund, $25,000 for your school taxes, and you get a total taxable value. That will be different. You will have more than one. Every property owner will have more than one tax bill because every property pays the general fund and school taxes at a minimum. So you will always have more than one taxable value per property. Your taxable values apply to the applicable millage rate, and that would be your total tax liability for that particular levy or millage rate. So we're going to take an example. Assume a homestead has a just value of $250,000. You have accumulated $30,000 in your Save Our Homes assessment cap protection in the year in which you filed homestead, and a homestead exemption of $25,000 plus the additional $25,000 on school taxes. I'm giving you an aggregate rate, about 7 mils for all of the MSTUs in the general fund, and everything that you would pay would be about 7 mils depending upon where you live. That would be applied for schools, and then about 12 mils for your non-school taxing authorities, because that is a little bit higher. You have at least 10 mils, about 10 mils for your public school funding. So here's the calculation in math for those of you that like math. Your just value minus your accumulated SOH gives you your assessed value. We start with assessed. So for school taxes, you say 220 minus your exemption gives you your taxable value, multiplied by your millage rate would be how much you would owe for your public school funding. And then the non-school is the calculation below it for assessed value minus your exemption. So what Penny was talking about, you'd have an additional exemption that would apply as a result of Amendment 1 that would not apply to your school taxes. For those non-school taxes, apply your millage rate, and that would be your total school taxes. Obviously, the addition of those two would be your total tax liability for your tax bill. I'm going to close only because I know we have to put up the chairs. I've canvassed about 35% of the total county, and those are the endorsements that I'm looking for. So I appreciate that.